Thank you, Congressman. Dr. Burkee?
Congressman Sensenbrenner. Congressman is right that spending is out of control in Washington, but it grew out of control during the term when Republicans were in control in Washington. Congressman Sensenbrenner's votes to cut taxes were not votes to cut taxes. We have not had our taxes cut. Taxes were deferred. We were all cut checks, and the bill was handed to our children. If you want to know where that $10 trillion debt has come from, it has come from votes on the part of Democrats to increase spending in ways that are not paid for with tax revenues, and on the part of Republicans. This is about being honest tonight, and we have to be honest because tax cuts that aren't accompanied by spending cuts are not tax cuts. They are deferred taxes that go to our children. And over the 6-year period, when Republicans were in charge, our party, we added $3 trillion to that national debt, a bill that we're going to hand to our kids. Now, Congressman Sensenbrenner, I'm glad he's got the nice rating from Citizens Against Government Waste. They gave him, by the way, a rating with nearly 90% in 2003 when he cast the deciding vote for Medicare Part D, one of the deciding votes, which is likely the biggest government program in American history. $8.7 trillion liability that is unfunded. That bill was passed. Not a single revenue was raised to pay for it, and the bill is going to go to our kids. The top accountant in the country, General Walker, who was here with Paul Ryan about a month ago, called it the most irresponsible program, new program, since the 1960s. Now, for all of Congressman Sensenbrenner's votes against this pork and that pork, and I agree he's voted against pork for Wisconsin. He's voted for plenty of pork for other states, $95 billion to be exact. I think it's wholly immoral and duplicitous to stand here and look us in the eye and tell us that, as other Republicans, that they've been fiscally responsible when they gave us programs like Medicare Part D that pass on that burden to our kids.
Next question. Is the current size and expense of our armed forces appropriate for the nation's interests, or should it be increased or decreased? We'll begin with we'll begin with Dr. Burkee.
Still good. We do need a strong and robust military, but I fashion myself as an old-style Republican, an old-style conservative. If you go back to the era before too many Republicans became big government Republicans, to the era of what I consider myself an authentic Republican. You go back to a time when you found Republicans were fiscally responsible across the board. Milton Friedman, the great economist who passed away recently, commented on, for example, tax cuts that Mr. Sensenbrenner voted for. And he said it's disingenuous for some Republicans to say that they've paid for themselves because they don't pay for themselves. This is one of the fathers of modern conservative economics. But traveling back in history to the old-style Republicans, these are the Republicans who said spending cuts precede tax cuts. Tax cuts don't precede spending cuts. And we also said that we've got to be very wary about big government. One of the great Republican presidents of the 20th century, certainly Reagan, you got to go back to Dwight Eisenhower. And remember, Eisenhower was the only president in the post-war period, since World War II, to actually decrease the military while still making us safe. I think we need to be very cautious about expanding the military because far too often Republicans fill those military bills with pork. Some of the pork bills that I referred to, the roughly $90+ billion that Congressman Sensenbrenner voted for just over that 6-year period, came in the form of defense bills that were jammed full of pork barrel spending. It's hard to vote against pork when it's in the defense bill. It's a lot easier to vote against pork when it's in a bill that maybe Democrats support. So we need to be very wary about that because I simply believe that as conservatives, it's going to be hard for us to argue that government should be big here, but small here. We need to make it as limited as possible everywhere while still doing our duty to protect ourselves and our men and women abroad.
Thank you.
President Reagan rebuilt our military. President Reagan gave America pride in itself. That cost money. And Ronald Reagan knew that it would cost money because we ramped our military down too far after the Vietnam War, and particularly during the Carter years. First of all, we need to pay our soldiers an adequate wage and to give them good benefits so that they will enlist and re-enlist. We need to give them the equipment so that they can protect themselves. We need to give the Veterans Administration benefits so that they can provide medical care for those who have come back with service-connected disabilities, including very serious ones. But if one's to be effective in Congress, one can't make perfect the enemy of the good. When you get a bill that is voted on as a package, you've got to vote yes or no. If you want to vote no all the time, fine. But there's some times where we have to do things, and to build barracks for the troops and to provide them the types of benefits they need, it's got to be done because the Congress has got an obligation to those kids who have volunteered to serve their country. And I'm not going to turn my back on that. No, granted, there are things in non-amendable bills that I don't like. But the fact of the matter is if those bills go down, the troops aren't fed, they're not housed, they're not paid, they don't get any benefits, and that would be a great breach of faith between the Congress and the people who volunteered.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question. Russia recently invaded Georgia, threatened a nuclear strike against Poland after they agreed to allow the U.S. to put interceptor missiles in their territory, and has been rattling their saber towards Ukraine. What should the United States do in response to Russia's continued aggression? We'll begin with Congressman Sensenbrenner.
First thing we need to do is to be energy independent. Russia was weak and subservient during the declining days of the Soviet Union because they had a very sick economy that could not maintain the military complex that the Communist Party wanted it to. Russia is now a rich country because the price of oil has gone up and the price of natural gas has gone up. And Russia is more dangerous now than it was in the 80s and the 70s before the Cold War ended. We need to have a strong but pragmatic approach toward Russia. John McCain is right. The invasion of Georgia and the annexation of the 2 Georgian territories announced today are a sign that Russia is going to become aggressive. The first thing the new president needs to do is needs to build up a coalition of those who are able to stand up against Russian aggression and Russian imperialism. The coalition will start by those that were under the communist yoke during the Cold War. But we have to broaden that, particularly to our friends in Western Europe, who are more dependent on Russian natural gas than we are dependent on Middle Eastern oil. That's going to be tough. That's why John McCain should be elected president.
Thank you, Congressman. Dr. Burkee?
Thanks. I'm going to just backtrack very quickly on the question of the armed forces. One of the things that's perplexed me about our approach to military spending. I'm for military spending, particularly during wartime. We should be spending to equip our troops. But if we're going to do it, let's pay for it. Most of this war has been fought on borrowed money, my friends. It's been borrowed, and we have hidden the expense with gimmicks like off-budget accounting. I also believe that we're going to attract new talent to the military with bills like the most current GI Bill, which our congressman voted against, which would have given people like the students in my class who serve in the military an opportunity to go to college under similar benefit levels that they would have received after World War II, but no longer receive. Now they've got to take out loans and pay for it themselves, even after having put their lives on the line in Iraq. The congressman is right about Russia. We do need to get off of oil and get off rapidly, because the key issue here is that Russia has been emboldened by those energy revenues. The question I ask you is, do you believe that by sending the same people back to Washington, who haven't done anything for 30 years on energy, that we're going to get there? Or do you think that maybe it's going to take a new generation of leadership in Washington to finally get us off of that yoke of foreign oil? I hope you'll find that it's the latter. I'm glad also to hear the Congressman expressing such strong support for John McCain, since it is about the first time I've heard it. I've been a long supporter of the man who I believe will be our next president, Mr. McCain, and I do agree with his strong approach to Russia. He's really the man to take on these challenges in these challenging times.